The biggest irony of mankind is that it often takes something trivial or a small event to spark things like world wars, which reshape the future of the entire world and claim nearly 100 million lives worldwide or more. This thing is called a black swan event, as Nassim Taleb, a Lebanese-American essayist and mathematical statistician who first coined the term, describes it as rare and surprising events that make a big difference when they happen. Now, you see, the incident that ignited World War was the sudden and shocking murder of Austria's Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 by Gavrilo Princip, a nationalist from South Slava. And 25 years later, a psychotic German leader shows an image of Hitlerite Poland simply because he hated the Polish people so much, seeing them as lesser beings who fit only to serve as laborers. Just a man's hatred started the destructive World War II. Fast forward to recent times, the Ukraine war is approaching its 1,000 days. The Israel-Palestine war has also added another important layer, and then there is China's aggression toward Taiwan. So we are again living in a touchwood geopolitical scenario that feels more like a dormant volcano just waiting for the trigger to erupt. So the biggest concern now is, are we approaching the World War II? Finally, are this Russia-Ukraine war and Israel-Palestine-Hamas conflict leading the world to another high-octane destructive war? Let's have a closer look at that. The Ukrainian government seems to be on the brink of collapse. President Ukraine Zelensky is in danger of being ousted, which could bring the ongoing war to a halt, a situation that could benefit both Ukraine and Russia. Besides that, whispers are swirling about the arrest of General Valery Zalny, the ex-commander of the Ukrainian military who was previously dismissed by Zelensky. But this reflects a larger trend of chaos within the government, with allegations of betrayals surfacing among the inner circle. Moreover, it's rumored that Zelensky's administration has already detained 2 colonels, accusing them of a plot to kidnap and kill the president. But solid facts are scarce, and it's uncertain if intelligence experts can shed more light on it. So now comes the big question: can a slice of the $61 billion of the U.S. recently set aside for military gear for Ukraine change the direction of the war, make it last longer, or do anything useful for the Ukrainians? According to Colonel Douglas Macgregor, a retired U.S. Army colonel and a well-known commentator, the answer is straightforward. The Army Tactical Missile System, ATA, CMS, can hit targets hundreds of miles away. But the Russian military has upped its game and can now shoot these down. However, the Storm Shadow, a long-range missile from France and Britain, and the Taurus KEPD-350, a German-Swedish missile, are a different story. These missiles, along with other long-range strike capabilities, have Russia a little worried. But still, the grim reality in Ukraine is quite clear, with a shocking number of casualties and refugees, making seeing the idea of sending aid seem hopeless. As intelligence agencies like MI6 and the CIA evaluate the situation, now they are really thinking of withdrawing support for Ukraine, as sending more reinforcement there will just be a waste of money. The Russian military has been waging a calculated, patient war of attrition. There's no denying that the Russians have become more aggressive, pushing westward along the front. In places like Donetsk, forces have been gathering after Mariupol fell, opening up paths to the west. They won't unleash their full force until they have a solid foothold, probably waiting for the ground to drive for easier movement. Once that happens, they're likely to push towards the Dnieper River, with their sights set on wrapping things up in Kharkiv first. They've amassed a significant number of troops further north, targeting historically Russian cities like Kharkiv and Odessa, with numerous bridge crossings over the Dnieper. We've already seen devastating strikes in recent weeks, taking out communication, railways, and air defense capabilities, likely setting the stage for a final offensive. But the Russians are also in a pickle. Some folks think Ukraine is like the first domino to fall, just like Vietnam was once thought to be. This idea makes things a bit layered, even if it's not entirely true. In the meantime, David Cameron, the former British Prime Minister and current British Foreign Minister, has made a bold statement. He says Ukraine has every right to use all the NATO weapons to defend itself against Russia's invasion. He also warned that if Ukraine uses these weapons, which are supplied by NATO countries, Russia would see Great Britain and France as allies of Ukraine. This statement has caused quite a stir in Moscow. The Russians are not happy with the British, the French, and others. They argue that if these weapons are delivered and fired from Ukrainian soil on behalf of Ukraine, they will see Great Britain and France as allies of Ukraine. They strongly challenge the notion that Russia is always at fault, and the only option besides self-destruction is withdrawing forces from Ukraine, much of which Russia controls. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has made it clear that even if Britain and France send weapons to the conflict, it won't change the end result, much like what Colonel Douglas Macgregor also mentioned. It seems like they're being treated as allies in the fight. There's also chatter about using nuclear weapons to cause tsunamis, but it's doubtful whether such ideas could work. Yet there's a real danger that Eastern European countries, including Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Russia, and Moldova, could also be attacked. The recent losses among French soldiers might just be the start. It's obvious that without help from outside, Ukrainians would have a hard time defending themselves. Lavrov called the British and French ambassadors to talk about the Ukraine conflict. He voiced his worries about the inflammatory remarks made by David Cameron. Lavrov cautioned that if Ukraine attacks Russian territory with British weapons, British military facilities and equipment could also be targeted. The funny part is this situation might remind you of the Crimean War of 1851. Back then, Britain and France, with help from Turkey, landed in Crimea and battled the Russians for nearly a year. The war concluded with the Russians agreeing not to push further west along the Black Sea. But the scenario has changed now. Today's Russia is a modern scientific industrial powerhouse with a formidable military. The possibility of the conflict escalating to a nuclear level is indeed a serious worry. A nuclear exchange would be disastrous with millions of lives lost within an hour. Putin has stated that Russia does not want to escalate to the nuclear level, but they will respond if provoked. Now, what does he mean by if provoked as for the $61 billion aid package to Ukraine? It was approved by the U.S. House of Representatives and signed into law by President Biden. This aid package is meant to support Ukraine's defense against the ongoing conflict. However, it's crucial to remember that the dynamics of international relations and conflicts are complex and multifaceted, and the outcomes can be extremely unpredictable. Now, imagine some powerful people in Europe and the US who are seen as part of a global group with a new conservative agenda and standing on shaky ground. These elites might be pretending to be good and moral to save their status, even though they're corrupt and pose a threat in Ukraine. Unless these elites are overthrown completely, things will stay the same as they hold the reins of money, media, and our economic future. Maybe only a financial meltdown at home could stop a head-on clash with Russia, but no one knows when that might happen. Imagine President Emmanuel Macron changing his approach after meeting with President Zelensky, probably because France doesn't have much sway over Russia. This trick isn't deceiving anyone, especially not the Russians who are ready to challenge it. Some NATO members also might start doubting whether it's wise to keep backing the conflict in Ukraine, leading to bigger rifts within the alliance. NATO seems weaker than it's ever been, a far cry from its past image of strength. Remember how over the past 2 years, American officials have insisted that Putin has already lost? Could Ukraine come out on top? Everyone almost agreed that Putin had lost this war. But these were just bold claims. This denial of truth isn't new. It's been there throughout history. The same thing happened with the Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War. People often choose to protect themselves rather than take responsibility for their disastrous choices. When we look back at decisions has made in the past, like during the Vietnam War, we see a trend. Power is often given more importance than doing what's right. Today, we see the same thing happening in Ukraine. The people are suffering.